everyone, and welcome to the PropCast. My name is Louisa Dickens, co-founder of LMRE and board director of the UKPA, and I shall be your weekly host. Each week for 30 minutes, we'll be connecting the VCs, PropTech startups, and real estate professionals globally, and assist in bridging that famous communication gap we all love talking about. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to the PropCast. Today's topic is on law, and we are fortunate enough to be joined by Conrad and Jonathan, aka Millsy, from Osborne Clarke. So welcome Conrad and welcome Millsy.
Hey Lou, thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, hi Lou, good to be on, good to talk to you.
For those who don't know about Osborne Clarke is an international law firm with offices in 25 cities. They are full service, but have a heavy focus on real estate and tech. Osborne Clarke has a European-wide PropTech practice and also assists US companies with their expansion and growth into Europe and Asia. And to introduce you to our guests on today's podcast, we'll start off with Conrad, who is a corporate and M&A partner and is based out of the London office of Osborne Clarke. He worked in business for 5 years before entering law and trained and qualified with US law firm Jones Day, has been with Osborne Clarke for 15 years now. He is international head of the firm's real estate infrastructure team, and his work crosses both real estate and technology. Now, for Millsy, who I met at PropTech in New York many months ago, he is currently an associate director at Osborne Clarke in London. Jonathan's practice focuses on real estate and PropTech, and he's currently on secondment in Osborne Clarke's New York office. He works with the US companies on their international expansion strategies. So thank you both for joining. Since I guess personal experience of setting up LMRE's US business and also having assisted clients launching in different cities across countries, I sort of know the pains of it. And I also know what it feels like, not really knowing where to sort of start, the do's and don'ts, the whole process behind it. Then after obviously learning and doing it, I thought who better to get on the podcast than both of you. So I guess without further ado, let's kickstart with it. And I guess why don't you tell us about how you both got into PropTech? Like, I guess, Millsy, do you want to kickstart?
Yeah, absolutely. So real estate used to be the bread and butter of my practice, and more of my clients were becoming increasingly involved in technology and how that could drive efficiencies and profitability in their business. And it really piqued my interest. And for me, it's just super exciting to be working with sort of what tends to be a really entrepreneurial group of people and really exciting part of the real estate industry, and working with clients that really care about the business and the change and the positive change that they're making to the sector.
And I guess, Conrad, how did you move into the PropTech space as well? You sort of balance a bit of infrastructure as well. Was it interest? Did it just sort of happen?
Yeah, a combination of both, I guess. I mean, as you say, we're kind of a full service law firm, but we tend to focus on a few very specific sectors. And as you mentioned, technology and real estate, two of those. I mean, they make up about 50% of our income in the UK market. So I guess when PropTech started to kick off and started to come to prominence, it just made perfect sense for us to look at it, because we could bring together our expertise from both of those areas to effectively help tech companies understand real estate and vice versa. And I guess personally, I've always had a practice that's kind of crossed both. I've got clients that sit within technology, but also clearly, as you'd expect, a strong real estate practice. So I find the whole thing interesting. And let's be honest, Lou, the other reason is it's a great market opportunity. So as we go through this period of kind of digitalization of real estate, there's going to be lots to run at. So it makes economic sense for us as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a good space to be in. And if every webinar and other podcast I'm listening to, everyone's being fairly optimistic, saying this sort of market is only going to grow and be resilient to everything we've all gone through in the last few months. So here's to hoping. Okay, so why don't we just start with Millsy? Tell us a little bit more about, say, a success story you've had with assisting a business to expand into sort of new jurisdictions.
Yeah, absolutely. So our US practice for the past 20 years now has been assisting US companies to expand into UK, Europe and Asia. And that started sort of on the West Coast with fast-growing venture-backed tech companies looking to expand quickly into Europe, and has really matured over 20 years. And now we've got an office in New York, and we still have a heavy tech focus, but real estate and PropTech play such a big part in the New York market that there are so many exciting companies now looking at European and Asian horizons as the next step for their business. If we were going to talk about a couple of success stories, two of our better ones that are particularly relevant to this propcast, first would be Airbnb. We help their sort of the leisure and hospitality platform. We help their expansion into the UK. And what's interesting is that they expanded in different ways in different jurisdictions. And so, and it really gives you a good cross sector of different ways that your listeners can do this. Airbnb expanded into the UK in sort of an organic fashion. So setting up a company, small number of boots on the ground to start with, and then grew as their market share did in the UK. However, in Germany, they acquired a competitor in the market and then scaled on the back of that. And as I said, it just shows a different approach to expansions, and appreciate this is more sort of the marketplace software platform part of the PropTech spectrum, but it was just an interesting cross sector. Another, again, a very interesting expansion for us and a great client is Allbirds. And so they're a footwear brand from the US, but with a really big tech and e-commerce platform to their business. Obviously, they have bricks and mortar real estate within their wider business portfolio as well. We assisted their acquisition into multiple jurisdictions, and they're doing very well and have performed very well and had some great press during the unfortunate COVID pandemic as well. And they're really going to go from strength to strength. In terms of expanding the other way, and although our business and our business model isn't expansion of UK businesses into the US, we've been here for 20 years now and have got a fantastic and strong, helpful network that we can share with clients. A couple of clients that have expanded successfully from the UK into the US, Ascenses is one of them, who obviously work in the sort of platform for co-working businesses. Yeah. And another great one is Pirate Studios. So Pirate Studios, although they hate me explaining like this, they're sort of a WeWork for recording space.
I remember you explaining this to me previously.
and they've got a really exciting model that works fantastically in the US with sort of the independent artist scene here and the real love of music and talent. So they've been really successful coming over here into the US as well.
Is there, so you've obviously mentioned some different businesses there. Is there a certain criteria or stage of business, size or whatever stage it might be, evolution, for businesses that move? You obviously mentioned, you can acquire business over in a different country, but do you see most business reaching, like, say, a certain, a certain level, whether it's income, people, what trends have you seen?
It's a really interesting question. I think the trend is that it's happening earlier and earlier in the growth cycle. Okay. So sort of 10, 15 years ago, we used to see businesses would strategically raise from their investors probably to a C round before they were under either investor pressure or had significant market presence in their home jurisdiction to consider moving elsewhere and selling their product into a new market. But if I'm honest, now we've seen some big clients move as early as a large A round funding. Okay. Like I said, depending on the product and the size of the round. A B round tends to be the sweet spot, coming under pressure. Nice pressure, obviously, from VC investors.
Global domination pressure.
Indeed, yeah. And that tends to be the sweet spot. Obviously, you can have customers and a market before you move abroad. And I guess the question is, when you commit boots on the ground and begin to chase more of a market share, you tend to want to be successful in your home market as well before you expand. What you don't want is for an expansion either to have a financial or a strategic hit on the home business if it's not a successful expansion. So timing is really important. It's a really good question.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I guess is it very in terms of launching, if you compare, say, US, Europe, I always find that the US PropTech or startups generally raise more capital. And so the way I think about it, do they have a larger chance or ability to launch, in Europe? Or or am I wrong in thinking that?
No, not at all. Europe is always a really appealing market for the US. Obviously, commonality of, particularly UK, commonality of language, similar cultures obviously really helps when either working out and calculating whether a product is going to fit or solve a problem in a different market. But as I said, the key in particular in relation to investor and internal expectation setting is to make sure that you understand the potential market and how your product fits in it. We always explain clients to think globally but to act locally, obviously because there are so many differences between individual markets. So if you're thinking about something like sales cycles, if you were going to go from the US to say Germany, the sales cycle is a lot longer, but following that, the customer base tends to be a much more loyal. So the opposite of the US, where your sales cycle tends to be shorter, but then questionably you have a more customer base. Well, other things like the way that comp is structured will be completely different between the US and the UK. You get, as you all know, you get really high salaries in the US as well, comparative to many European cities. And just things like employment laws are going to be completely different. US, you have employment at will. Somewhere like France, for example, if a PropTech was moving into Paris as a key market, they've got a very protectionist regime in terms of employees and employee rights. And obviously just generally talent is incredibly hard to find, but incredibly important for businesses. And obviously that's where you guys at LMRE come in as well.
Yeah. Thank you for that little sell. What would you say the main obstacle businesses come across if you're sort of launching to expand across border? You mentioned like a couple then to do different sales cycle, different sort of markets, maybe languages. What's the one which you'd say your clients is the biggest one which keeps coming up?
I don't think we can stress it enough, but it really is market and understanding that everything is going to be different. Market and cultural differences can be huge. Even when OC moved from the West Coast and expanded to the East Coast of the UK, it was a completely different place, and it took us a while to get our head around the different way that the market works. In the States, you even get micro issues between states. So we hadn't appreciated the differences between the Boston and New York market when we first moved, and we're now an East Coast practice as opposed to a New York practice for that reason. Okay. But one of the things, for that reason, and understanding the market and knowing that market and market knowledge is going to be key, our advice is always not to move too fast and to do everything in a proportionate way. So obviously there's different shades of grey to that, but we always advise as part of your understanding the market, whether that's to get a small number of boots on the ground first before going in too hard, or dipping your toe to understand the market and how your product fits and the problem that you're solving. Because as I said before, you don't want to be causing capital or cash flow problems to the parent or the home business with an unsuccessful or particularly problematic expansion.
I guess also that's one of the selling points of Osborne Clarke, for the various introductions you can almost like help businesses like soft launch and giving them that access to certain businesses in the market that might be useful. I guess, so for us as a business, we see, obviously, you already mentioned Boston. So in the US, there's definitely some PropTech hotspots, New York, San Fran, Boston, Arizona, and then over in Europe, we have, well, I guess London's now separate, but you have London, Amsterdam, Berlin, Paris. Those are some hotspots. Where do you see the strongest growth?
That's really interesting. I'll take this one again, Conrad. So as I said, for US PropTechs, the UK always tends to be the number one destination. As I said already, language, cultural similarities. Important to realize how different the rest of Europe can be. We've had some conversations and with clients or potential clients here in New York where they band together the whole of Europe as one destination of choice, and you really have to strip back and realize how different each market is and how different expansion into each market needs to be, because understanding, like I said, how the product fits and the cultural difference and the market interplay with your product is going to be really important. One that you've not mentioned, Lou, is Israel is obviously becoming hugely important in the PropTech market. And we at Osborne Clarke, we always talk about the PropTech triangle. So US, mainly New York for PropTech, UK, again, mainly London and Israel as well, being a real key demographic for the PropTech ecosystem. The trend tends to be, in terms of popularity, I'd actually say it goes Israel to US is where we're seeing most movement, and then US to UK, and then UK into US. People still see the US, and particularly New York, as sort of the big, scary, very costly market to crack into.
Very costly,
as you'll well know. But interestingly, and from sort of speaking to Israeli PropTechs and their founders, they're always most keen to crack the US first.
Yeah.
Various reasons for that, but one of them is simply if they consider that if they make it in the US, they can make it anywhere, and then they'll head back out to Europe after that. And as I said, for US PropTechs, it tends to be London is destination number one.
Yeah, there's actually part of this this series. I interviewed Sivan Blassamine, who's founder of Rentigo. They're basically a PropTech payment company within the property management space, but he's obviously launched his business over there from Israel, but he's also launching something which is called an innovation hub, and he's having it in Tel Aviv, London, and New York, and it's got hundreds of PropTech startups involved. So that is an introduction which I will make, because there's definitely some synergy there, and exactly what you said, those Israeli PropTechs are looking to get to the US, and what all the processes behind that. So yeah, definitely tune in to listen to that one. Conrad,
good to know that we're not off piece then, and that we're right in our thinking as well. It's always good.
Yeah, well, hopefully we both are. Conrad, let's get you involved in the podcast. I guess prior to COVID, there's been like an accelerated expansion in the past sort of 5-10 years in the PropTech landscape. Like, why do you really think that is?
Yeah, I mean, look, there definitely hasn't. It's good to be talking. I was very much listening to Jonathan taking us through that podcast, and that was great.
Sorry, buddy.
That's fine. Yeah, there's been, I mean, from my perspective, a real expansion in PropTech. And I think if you take real estate, it's a very old sector. It's been around a long time. It's a slow asset class. It's a liquid. It's very slow to trade. And because of that, I guess there is a historical issue with real estate being slow to adapt. And it's had that label of being laggards and being an industry that's kind of failed to embrace technology. But I just think that's not the case anymore. Things have definitely changed. I'd say in particular, probably in the last 5 years, certainly from what I've seen, that the market's really woken up to the opportunities that technology can bring. And now I think we see it from our perspective in every aspect of the property life cycle. And why? Well, I guess in my mind, there's a few reasons. One, I think the technology sector is now better understanding the real estate market and the people that are involved and what investors and developers really want from technology. I think what that's also meant that the tech has got better. There are now kind of boxed up applications that are much more affordable for property companies to plug and play, rather than having to need to develop everything from scratch on a starting basis. And that drives down cost and makes it easier to implement the products. And I think also it's the demand for the technology, particular software, has just really increased. Jonathan mentioned earlier the competitive nature of our market, and the reality is margins are compressed and people need to find efficiencies, and technology can deliver that. I think we're further along the adoption curve. There were a number of propcos who were interested but just didn't want to be the first people to put their toe in the water. And now you've got some really big listed property companies who have put digitalization right at the center of their strategy. And the reality is there's safety in numbers. So a number of others have then followed suit. And lastly, the markets go through a massive period of change. I mean, take for instance, co-working and flexible office space. A few years back, it didn't exist. Now, I guess partly thanks to WeWork, the reality is that's become almost an established asset class. And that's creating new opportunities for PropTech. Census, which we mentioned earlier on, the reality is that's a software business that provides a platform for operators who are running shared workspaces. 10 years ago, there simply wouldn't have been a market for that business. It wouldn't have had clients to go after, but now it's a thriving SaaS business. It's on the stock exchange. It's just raised 7 million on an 80 million valuation. And that's what's happening. I think, the market is changing, and there's now there's kind of a real marketplace for that technology to be sold into.
Yeah. I recently read Osborne Clarke's Future-Proof Real Estate Report, which those who are listening is a must read. You surveyed 550 technology and real estate thought leaders from all over Europe. And you found that 82% of respondents see the tech industry as having an increasingly important influence on the built environment. You mentioned obviously flex working just then. What other growth areas do you predict?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for mentioning the report. That's great. Yeah, do read it. I mean, the only thing I would say is some of the data is slightly out of date because we launched that in 2018. But the reality is there's some insights in there that I think are still worth looking at. We've got an update to that report coming out soon, so watch out for that. But the big area I think was identified, those tech experts thought would definitely be most commonplace by 2020, which is the kind of time frame we looked at the time, was big data. So 73% thought that big data would be commonplace in the market. And, I'd say that's come true. The reality is that kind of data is the lifeblood of digital transformation in real estate. You can see it through kind of every aspect of the industry, whether it's in kind of research and due diligence or some of the modern methods of construction, building information, twins, kind of well-being apps and amenity provision in housing. It doesn't matter which aspect you look at, data is there, and it continues, in my mind, to give huge opportunities. An example is property management. The reality is now buildings are absolutely packed full of tech and sensors that's enabling people to really monitor total building performance. And those platforms are collecting real-time data, looking at energy, consumption, moisture, heat, air quality, just lots of data points that will enable occupiers to have a better experience and to drive efficiency. And that's not just good for the users of the buildings, that's amazing for the landlords because they can then use all of that data to improve the financial performance of the building. One set of data, great. Start aggregating that with data across other buildings, across other portfolios. Then you can really start to identify trends and characteristics that will have a big impact on that portfolio. So data's the big area for me. I just think we're only just beginning to tap into it.
Yeah, I think...
Lou, Conrad, obviously worth, on the legal side, just mentioning data protection there as well and how important that's going to be for expanding and growing businesses, particularly in the PropTech sector. Not only GDPR, obviously with personal data, but as Conrad said, with the amount of data that is now available and can be collected, it's just making sure that's being done in the right way to avoid risk to not only the growth business, but the home business in terms of brand as well. Mm-hmm. Obviously, with CCPA being launched in California, very, very similar to GDPR, thinking about data transfers where you can't freely transfer data between the US and the UK, for example. So there's a lot of considerations in particular that will come around and become more prevalent the more important big data becomes to real estate businesses.
So what are the ways of getting around that then if you can't transfer the data?
And so you can't freely transfer data. Data can be transferred, but there's very strict guidelines and rules around it. And so Conrad and I, the lowly real estate and corporate lawyers, would obviously introduce our clients to our wonderful IP, IT, and data teams who do a lot of this for a lot of our real estate clients.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the key thing there is it is difficult. You've got to be really careful, but if you take the right advice, then there are means of being able to take advantage of using that data. So, my view on this stuff is don't be frightened of it. Look at the market opportunity and what you want to do. Look at how you want to commercialize it. Just make sure you take the advice. And if you can't, well, then you've got to look at creative ways of, trying to use that data. But as long as you get the right advice, I don't think you should be too frightened.
You're exactly right.
And the right advice is going to come from Osborne Clarke.
Well done, Lou. Well done.
If we're looking at opportunities post-COVID, I've interviewed people from all different verticals of PropTech, and we just spoke about, the uptake in, basic digitalization happening in real estate, which is good news. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for your business?
Yeah, I mean, COVID's clearly ignoring for one moment the kind of health and human impact of it, which is obviously terrible. The reality is it's having a massive impact on the real estate market. There's lots of data to make it very clear that real estate as a sector is being one of the heaviest hit. Retail and other markets have been impacted similarly, but real estate has felt it. And so I think PropTech has got a lot to give. I think in the short term, there may be a small hiatus while people get to grips with how to deal with the business as usual and immediate issues that they've got. But frankly, in the long run, I think it's going to accelerate investment into technology and adoption of PropTech. And even in the short run, there's lots being written about how technology is going to be used to get people back into buildings sooner rather than later. Anything, that's going to help people maintain social distancing and keep people safe at this time is going to be key. I mean, I mentioned to you earlier when we were chatting before coming on, I went into an office on Tuesday and, the landlord's done everything they need to in terms of fulfilling their regulation, and they've got perspex up in the lifts and they're doing everything they can. But the only way to get the lifts to move between the floors is to press the buttons. And if you're on the other side of the divide, how do you press the button? The reality is, looking at the adoption of, let's say, smart technology and smart lifts, those businesses that have done that, they're the ones that are going to benefit. Because when they're trying to move massive quantities of people up and down through 50 floors of a building, if they don't have the right tech in there, they're not going to be able to do it. So, look, definitely it's going to have an impact. But I think in the long run, as I say, I think it's going to accelerate adoption.
Yeah, agreed. Millsies, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say there's the popular meme, but I think that's only popular to PropTech nerds like us. But there's the meme everybody's seen, which says, what drove digitalization in your business, CEO, CTO, or COVID? And for a lot of people, answer number 3 is unfortunately the right one. So in terms of, I guess, the crossover that we've got on the PropCast here, overseas talent and the appreciation that talent can work from anywhere is going to be key. So the reducing cost base across businesses and the growth acceleration that will allow global talent is now, people now realize that's at their fingertips, and they're a lot more accepting of the fact that the work from home and the flexible working culture and the benefits that can bring to the business. The big one for me is going to be functional tech. As Conrad touched on there, lifts within buildings. So you swipe your card in and the lift opens because it knows where you want to go. But functional tech, so in real estate, even on the residential side, things like paperless leasing, virtual tours, anything that removes the friction and, I guess, for a short term, human contact in real estate and in tech is going to be huge. Actually, an interesting one for listeners, a live conversation that Conrad and I are having with a client at the moment is actually in the retail space. There's a lot of talk about how the traditional lease is dead, so long terms with upward only rent reviews, and how retailers can't possibly take on that liability anymore. And Conrad was speaking to one of our landlord clients recently who is looking to find solutions, as is the whole of the landlord market, to bring more accuracy to turnover leases and turnover rent calculations, which is going to help the retail industry move forward and repair itself. At the moment, it's sort of seen as a fairly untrustworthy data set because there's so much to it and so many moving parts. But it's functional tech like that and problem solving within certain markets that are either in distress, in trouble, on a downward curve, that is going to be that COVID is going to really bring to the fore and have a big impact on, I think.
Yeah. It's nice. Sorry, Carrie.
So I was going to say, Lou, I was going to say the other thing, just building on that, I think not in the immediate term, but slightly further out, basically smart buildings and energy efficiency is going to be a big area. I mean, there's clearly a massive increasing desire to have kind of best-in-class efficiency, and all types of tenants and occupiers are working under their own kind of desires to prove their kind of environmental, social governance credentials. And with the government, and there's lots of pressure at the moment for governments to kind of to drive forward the economic stimulus off the back of COVID with kind of funding packages around the kind of green agenda. And I think there's going to be lots of opportunities for businesses to use technology to improve the energy efficiency of their homes and their buildings. And that I think that decarbonisation agenda is going to also fuel a lot of adoption.
Yeah,
it's top up and top down, isn't it, Conrad? So not only is the pressure coming from a governance of individual businesses, lenders, the government itself, but also customers and, taking the real estate example, tenants. So they want the building to be representative of how they want their business to be perceived, their brand. And so the pressure on real estate is coming from both ends at the moment. And as Conrad said, smart buildings and smarter cities are very much going to be part of our future.
It's nice to see that the real estate world is finally seeing all these opportunities and what service it can provide to the industry. I think, it's really seen a sort of surge in interest in the last, 2 to 3 years? I mean, I know there's been MRI and Yardi around for ages, but finally it's been taken seriously. And I genuinely think, and I say this in every single podcast, this is just only the beginning, and I'm thankful that we're all in this space, but I'm also equally excited to what's going to come, what businesses are going to sort of grow, what businesses will go global, but also it'll be interesting to see which ones don't make it through COVID, because there's a lot of people who will be hit by it, but the best products will come out, and they're going to be in the US and going to be bloody everywhere. Like you saw BTS, they were sort of at the forefront of it. Great product. They've gone from the US to UK to Europe and doing great things. So hopefully there'll be a few more triumphs like that. But with that being said, so for businesses, PropTech, startups, people who are looking for advice, before we get to the end of the show, is there anything which both of you would like to sort of share with us, how to connect them, any sort of parting bit of advice? Millsy, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you very much for having us on. Really appreciate you having us on and your support for Osborne Clarke as well. In terms of contact, go to our website, osborneclarke.com, or Lou has our details. Feel free to link in with Conrad and I as well. Happy to chat about supporting real estate and PropTech businesses in Europe, and also US businesses looking to expand into new jurisdictions. In terms of parting points, I guess, coming back to Conrad's big data point, it's the horse that's been flogged over a number of years, and everybody loves to talk about it, but I really think that COVID is putting data and the use of data for everybody's benefit really into the public eye as well. So if anybody needs advice on the management or utilization of their data, please do reach out to us.
Awesome. And Conrad?
Yeah, well, not a lot to add to that. You know how to get hold of us, but I guess just going back to your point around what the future opportunities are, we're committed to this. We see a huge amount of growth over the coming years, and as a business, we're not going away from it. We're gonna double down and focus even more on that crossover between technology and real estate. And I think we like to think of ourselves as being a bit different. Yet we need to make money, and at some point in time, we like to have work that we can charge for. But the reality is, we like this space. We like talking about it, and we like having creative conversations with other players within it. So if people want to talk to us, reach out. We're not just going to put the clock on. We want to have a dialogue. So don't stay back.
Awesome. Well, look, Millsy and Conrad, thank you so much for coming on the Propcast. It's been a pleasure having you both. And hopefully we will catch up soon, whether it's in New York or in London.
Sounds good. Thanks, Lou.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us again, Lou. Go LMRE.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Propcast, and a big thanks to our special guests. Make sure you visit our website, www.lmre.co.uk, where you can subscribe to our show, or you'll find us on iTunes and Spotify, where all good content is found. Whilst you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate if you could rate and review us on iTunes, or if you simply just spread the word. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday, and I'll catch you later.
You're listening to a Podcast Company podcast. This was made by Podcast Syndicator, where we help you go from start to grow to making money with your podcast. Let us help you share your message and your voice with the world. Reach out now, Jason at podcastsyndicator.com or Brett at podcastsyndicator.com to find out more. Thank you for listening, and do come back to hear nothing but the best podcasts.